I am Lexi, a 27-year-old woman, and my entire family is upset with me. Before you judge me, please hear my story. I have a sister named Rose, a 32-year-old woman who got divorced a few months ago. It has been a difficult time, and I have been trying to be there for her. But if I'm being honest, Rose and I have never been close. She was not a good big sister, and she and her small group of friends had cut me off. When Rose got divorced a few months ago, she was a mess and didn't work, so she had to move back in with our parents. I don't live close to either Rose or my parents and don't see them very often, so it didn't matter to me. However, even as a child, I always felt like the black sheep. Rose was the golden child who did everything perfectly, including prom queen moments. Friends tormented me for years, and my parents never stepped in, so I always felt like it. While my parents loved her, I was the rebellious, challenging one. I got into fights, broke curfew, dyed my hair bold colors, and more. The worst part, though, was how Rose used to make me feel like she would go out of her way to make sure I wasn't welcome at school, including by preventing me from making plans with her friends in front of me and spreading rumors about me. Then my parents' reaction, or lack thereof, to whatever Rose did. They always supported her. I recall telling them once about what she had said to me, and they dismissed it with the comment, "Oh, that's just how sisters are." It hurt a lot, and I carried that resentment with me through adulthood. However, a month after my sister's divorce, my partner, Joshua, 29 male, proposed to me. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. After all, I had been waiting for this for close to 4 years, and we had talked about marriage a lot, so when he finally proposed, it felt like everything was falling into place naturally. I told my parents right away, even though we weren't particularly close, because I thought maybe this might be something that would bring us together. I started planning my wedding almost immediately, including finding venues, dresses, flowers, and other details. I was thrilled to share this moment with my friends and the few family members that I am close to, but after a few weeks I drove to their house the following evening, kind of bracing myself for the worst, and sure enough, as soon as I sat down, my mom came out with it. She sounded serious when she said they had something important to discuss with me. To be honest, my first thought was that it might have something to do with Rose and her whole disarray following her divorce. She explained that Rose was still heartbroken and needed time to move on and possibly find another man, and that my wedding would somehow interfere with that process. I sat there in shock, wondering if my mother was serious when she said that my wedding had to be postponed for 2 years because Rose had recently gotten divorced. It was so unexpected that I briefly laughed aloud, thinking she must be kidding. My mother then hit me with the famous line, "We are family. We need to support each other." I've heard this from her a million times. It's always about supporting Rose. It's as if they expect me to be this silent supporting figure in the background, always putting her first. I mean, how could she possibly believe that my wedding, one of the most important days of my life, had anything to do with Rose's love life? First, I couldn't help but become upset. I told my mother that this was completely uncalled for, that I couldn't believe she dared to ask me such a question, and that I didn't want to stay there and hear more of their justifications or guilt trips. However, it didn't end there. Over the following few days, my mother called me repeatedly to try to persuade me that this was the right thing to do and that it wasn't just about Rose, but about the entire family. It would be hard for Rose to attend my wedding while still going through her divorce, but when has life ever been fair? Things don't stop because one person is going through something. It's not like I'm trying to make Rose unhappy. I just want to get married and start a life with Joshua. My dad also got involved, which surprised me because he's usually pretty hands-off when it comes to this kind of situation. He tried to reason with me by pointing out how emotional Rose was at the moment and how I don't understand how that's my problem. I can't control how she feels, and I certainly can't put my life on hold indefinitely just to spare her emotions. After that, my parents continued to call and reach out for days, and every time I saw their name appear on my phone, I knew it was going to be more of the same guilt trip about my wedding. He made it sound like my wedding would be too much for her to handle, as if my happiness was somehow going to make her more upset. After about a week of this back and forth, I decided to take matters into my own hands and call Rose directly. At first, I was fairly calm, just trying to get to the bottom of it, and I asked her directly if she was the one. To be honest, I was getting frustrated with them for delaying the wedding. My sister, on the other hand, hadn't said a word to me. It was all coming from my parents, and I was starting to wonder if this was really what Rose wanted or if my parents were just projecting their problems onto me. She confirmed that she did think it would be better if I postponed the wedding, explaining that she wasn't prepared to handle the attention from all the relatives who would be asking her about the divorce during the wedding. I was shocked, thinking, I know that a divorce is a big deal, but this was the wedding we were talking about. one of the biggest days of my life, so why should my wedding be overshadowed by that? I calmly explained to her that this was my wedding, and that I highly doubted anyone would be bothering her about something so personal at an event that was supposed to be about Joshua and me. After all, at weddings, people are too preoccupied with the couple getting married, the food, the dancing, and their own lives to approach Rose and ask intrusive questions about her divorce at my wedding, of all places. The more she talked, the more irate I became. Eventually, I just told her that the wedding would happen whether she liked it or not, and that whether she or our parents showed up or not, I wasn't going to put my life on hold because she was feeling fragile. She refused to listen, stating repeatedly that she wasn't emotionally ready to face everyone, and that if I truly cared about her, I would think about waiting until she felt stronger and more prepared to handle the attention. I immediately called my parents and told them the same thing after hanging up the phone. Look, I love you guys, but I'm not postponing the wedding. If you want to support me, that would be great. If not, I'll understand, but the wedding is happening with or without you. My mom naturally broke down in tears as she described how I was tearing the family apart and how Rose needed time to heal. Though I won't lie, walking down the aisle by myself was difficult. I had always imagined that moment in my life, and in my head it always involved my dad by my side. But as I approached Joshua and saw his face light up with that enormous smile, it dawned on me that I was doing this for us, not for my parents, not for Rose, and not for anyone else. After all, I had decided that I wasn't going to back down, and the wedding did take place 3 weeks ago. When the ceremony ended and we arrived at the reception, things became a little more complicated. Most of my extended family had arrived, including some aunts, uncles, and cousins who hadn't been involved in the drama, but they noticed that my parents weren't there and were curious, so they began asking, "Where are your mom and dad?" Joshua and I were surrounded by my closest friends and those who genuinely support us, and honestly, that was enough. I tried to avoid answering the questions at first, not wanting to turn the day into a family drama, but the curiosity kept coming, so eventually I sat down with a few of my aunts and cousins and told them everything. I explained how my parents had insisted that I postpone the wedding, how they wanted me to put my life on hold for Rose's sake, and how ultimately they decided not to attend. It felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders when I finally gave in to their demands. I didn't sugarcoat it. I was tired of acting like everything was fine when it wasn't. Their reactions were a mix of shock and disbelief. Some were appalled that my parents would even ask something so unreasonable, while others were upset on my behalf. To be honest, it felt good to have some of my family members understand what I'd been dealing with. As the evening wore on, more people heard the story, and by the end of the evening, it was pretty much well known. I had anticipated some criticism, but instead something unexpected happened. My parents began to be avoided by the rest of the family. It seemed as though the entire incident had made people realize how they had been treating me for years, putting Rose first and expecting me to always be second class. People started contacting me to offer their support, saying things like, "I had no idea." Then something even more unexpected occurred. A cousin of ours who was getting married next month didn't want that kind of tension on her big day. I wasn't expecting that at all. And while I feel a little guilty, I can't help but feel validated because for years I felt like an outsider, like I was the one constantly causing problems, whether I was the one causing them or not. After my wedding, Joshua and I went on our honeymoon for a week, and it was honestly the best escape I could have asked for. We went to this gorgeous beach resort, just the two of us, away from all the family drama. I didn't check my phone for the most part, just enjoying the peace. I knew there would be messages from my parents and probably my sister, but I just couldn't handle it during that time. I was being understanding enough, but now people were beginning to realize that maybe it wasn't all on me. My mom called me an entitled brat, among other unkind terms, and my dad's tone was more of the same. When we returned from the honeymoon, which was our time to unwind and begin this new chapter without all the stress, reality hit me pretty hard. I decided to finally listen to the voicemails that had piled up, and I was honestly unprepared for what I heard. Rather than my parents attempting to work things out or even attempting a civil conversation, the messages were full of rudeness and anger. At one point, he even said, I ignored the messages at first, assuming they would stop after a few days, but instead, things got worse. They started calling even more frequently, leaving voicemails full of the same toxic behavior, and when I blocked their numbers, they found other ways to contact me, including email, Facebook, and other social media platforms. That I was destroying the family wasn't just frustration, it was downright unhealthy. The guilt trips, passive-aggressive remarks, and constant accusations that I was selfish were all too much. It was exhausting. At one point, when they started using new phone numbers to avoid being blocked, I blocked one number, and within a few hours, they'd be back with another. It felt like I was playing some twisted game of whack-a-mole, but instead of moles, it was just toxic patterns repeating. They were even persistent on Instagram, where my sister, who hadn't spoken since the wedding, finally chimed in and sent me lengthy messages about how I ruined the family by choosing Joshua and my happiness over family unity. I will admit that I became extremely frustrated with family members who couldn't accept no. After all, what do you do when your own family won't let you go? Every time I tried to step back and concentrate on my own life, they would find a way to drag me back into the drama. It seemed like they couldn't handle the fact that I was content without them and that I no longer needed their constant approval or validation. I discussed this with Joshua, who has been incredibly supportive, suggesting everything from what I tried to explain to them about how their behavior was affecting me, but they didn't want to hear it. My mom kept saying things like, "You're choosing your husband over me," but I feel conflicted because even after everything they've said and done, there's this small part of me that feels bad, like I'm the one at fault for setting boundaries. I'm at a loss here, and part of me feels that I should just cut them off completely, change my number, delete them from social media, and go. It was classic emotional manipulation, and at this point, I don't even think they're interested in understanding my side. It feels like they just want control, like they're upset that I've broken free from their influence, and they're doing everything they can to pull me back in. Complete lack of communication. But then there's this voice in the back of my mind that keeps saying that I'll regret it, that one day I'll wish I had handled things differently, or that maybe, just maybe, they'll realize how unhealthy their behavior has been. But let's be honest, how likely is that to happen? Based on everything I've seen so far, they're not going to change. If anything, they seem to be doubling down, acting like I betrayed them by standing up for myself. Reddit, I need advice on how to finally stop this, because I can't stand living like this all the time, walking on eggshells, waiting for the next wave of guilt-ridden messages to come in. Has anyone else had to deal with family members who wouldn't stop pressuring them? How did you handle it? Is cutting off contact the best course of action here? Or is there a middle ground that I haven't considered yet? I feel like I've tried everything, but they just won't let go. I want to move on with my life and concentrate on my marriage. But it seems like my family is determined to keep me stuck in this cycle of obligation and guilt. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Hello, everyone. I thought I'd give you a little more background information about my family dynamic because many of you have been asking me about my childhood. There isn't a big dramatic story or one particular moment that made me realize my family wasn't supporting me. Rather, it was a gradual realization. It's difficult to explain without coming across as ungrateful that I didn't feel emotionally supported or understood growing up because, although my parents did what they were supposed to do, I had food, clothes, went to school, and occasionally took family vacations. I never felt like I was loved or truly valued because they were always much more focused on my older sister, Rose, than they were on the traditional older sibling gets more responsibility scenario. When I brought home good grades or tried to show them something I was excited about, they would give me this half-hearted, "That's nice, Lexi," before moving on to whatever Rose needed. It's difficult to describe how isolating it feels to be a child who is constantly pushed to the side. It was as if, in their eyes, Rose could do no wrong, and I was the troublemaker, the difficult one, and the one they had to put up with. I think I was around 16 when I got into a pretty serious fight with some of my friends at school. It was one of those teenage situations where it felt like the end of the world, and I came home crying, hoping for some consolation or maybe even some advice. I'm not saying that I expected a full-on therapy session, but the phrase, "Hey, it'll be okay," would have been nice instead. When I told my parents about it, my dad said, "You probably brought it on yourself. You should learn to pick better friends." That was it. No hug, no encouragement, just blame. Meanwhile, if Rose came home with even the smallest problem, they would drop everything to help her through it. They thought it was funny to tease me whenever they could. They would hide my belongings, make fun of my clothes, or even prank call the house and pretend to be people from school, saying awful things about me. It may seem silly now, but as a child, it damaged my self-esteem, and the worst part was that my parents knew about it. I would tell them what Rose was doing, and they would just shrug it off. I was about 13 when Rose and her friends persuaded me to play a game of makeover with them. I should have known better, but I was so desperate for any attention or acceptance from my sister that I went along with it. They then proceeded to apply makeup to my face in the most ridiculous way possible, making me look like a clown. I started off saying, "She's just teasing you, Lexi. It's normal sibling stuff," but it never felt normal to me. When I got home crying, my parents simply told me, "It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." There was no consequence for Rose, no empathy for me, just the same old deal with it attitude. Looking back, I realized that these were the foundations of the relationship, or lack thereof, that I have with my family today. They had taken pictures and sent them to people at school without my knowledge. I kept trying to earn their approval, to make them see me as deserving of their love and care, but it never worked because they were too preoccupied with Rose and her issues to care about me or what I was going through. I believe that's why I've grown into the person I am now, someone who has learned to be self-reliant and to defend herself even when it's difficult. For this reason, when the wedding situation occurred, it wasn't the first time I felt let down by my family. Rather, it was the final straw after years of being overlooked. The last straw was when they asked me to postpone my wedding for Rose's sake. It felt like they hadn't learned from all the times they put her first and me last and expected me to continue playing the same role I had always played, the one who sacrificed her happiness for the sake of family unity. But I couldn't do it any longer, so I finally chose myself, and to be honest, it feels like a huge relief. It's taken me a long time to realize that it's okay to put my needs first, and that just because they're family doesn't mean I have to put up with mistreatment. I have Joshua, and we're creating our own little family where I feel loved, supported, and respected, something I never really had growing up. Thank you for reading, and I am grateful to everyone who has reached out with advice and kind words. It means a lot. I wanted to give you all some updates because a lot has happened since I last posted. 1 week after Joshua and I returned from our honeymoon, my parents, predictably, found another way to irritate me by sending me a message saying they wanted my childhood belongings out of their house and that I should come and pick them up on Sunday. I'm learning that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. It's difficult, but I know I'm doing what's best for me. It felt abrupt, but I was pretty much over it by then, so I thought I'd just go get my stuff and that would be that. I replied, okay, trying not to make a big deal out of it, but when I drove over there with Joshua and Tal for support, I saw that everything I had was completely disorganized, not just neatly arranged, mind you, but they had thrown everything out haphazardly, as if it had been sitting there in a garage sale. I was angry because it seemed like they couldn't wait to get rid of me, and my belongings were just collateral damage. I mean, who does that? It wasn't even about the stuff. It was about the blatant lack of respect. Some of my old books were damp from being exposed to the morning dew, and a bunch of clothes and childhood toys were filthy as if they had been left in the grass for a while. I could see some water stains on things. They were sending me a message that said, "We're done with you." However, even though I was upset, I knew they were expecting me to lose it and yell, cry, or demand answers. I could almost see my mother watching me from the window, waiting for me to react, and since I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction, I kept my cool and turned to Joshua and asked him to help me load everything into the truck. We didn't talk to my parents, knock on the door, or ask for an explanation. We simply loaded the truck in silence. I believe Joshua could tell that I was holding back a lot, but he remained silent and helped me finish it. It was strange, though, because as we were packing everything up, I realized that I wasn't depressed, heartbroken, or devastated. Rather, I was just relieved that this was the last thing I needed to completely close the chapter on my relationship with my parents. They were letting me know that I was no longer welcome in their lives, and rather than feeling angry, I felt liberated from the guilt trips, emotional games, and the constant pressure to fit in with the family that never really made room for me. It felt like they were tying the knot, and to be honest, I was more than willing to let it go. Update 3. Hi everyone, I know it's been a few months, but something unexpected happened, and I just had to share it. The irony is too great, and you know how I found out. Not from her, not from my parents, who haven't spoken to me since the wedding situation, that my sister Rose, the same sister who was too devastated and heartbroken after her divorce to attend my wedding, is getting married next week. I promise I'm not making this up. The woman said she needed at least 2 years to move on and find herself, and a new man is walking down that aisle in less than 7 days. One of our cousins sent me a screenshot of their social media engagement announcement. I was sitting at home, taking care of myself, when all of a sudden, Rose was beaming and in love, showing off her ring with her new fiancé as if none of the drama from the previous year had ever happened. I had to laugh because I couldn't even be upset at this point. It's honestly just ironic. What's even more bizarre is that neither Rose nor my parents has mentioned the entire situation. I don't even care to be involved in their lives anymore, and it's kind of freeing to be honest because I'm not sitting here waiting for their approval or worrying about what they think of me. I've moved on, and so have they. Rose is getting married, my parents are doing their thing, and I'm over here living my life. I'm completely okay with it though, because it feels like they've officially written me off. I'm not looking back, and I'm living my best life with Joshua. Thank you again, Reddit. You all have been incredible, and I hope you succeed in whatever you're doing.